When Michael left Anna for a younger woman, he never imagined the price he would pay. But 10 years later, fate orchestrated an unexpected reunion, forcing him to face the wife he once abandoned. What bitter lesson awaits Michael? And who has Anna become? Don't miss this emotional story. The final moments will leave you speechless. The small dining room was now but a cold shell of the warmth it once held. Pale white light poured down from the ceiling bulb, casting warped shadows across the walls and the worn wooden floor, like ink stains smudged on an unfinished canvas. The dining table sat still at the center of the room, draped in a faded white tablecloth that no longer held its clean, orderly grace. A dark red wine stain spread across the fabric, blotchy and raw like an open wound. On the table, 2 plates of forgotten food lay cold. A greasy sheen had settled over the congealed sauce, while the forks and knives sat askew, silent witnesses to a meal abandoned in quiet resignation. Nearby, a wine glass lay tipped over, its dried trail of crimson tracing down the glass, and onto the table a mark of something broken beyond repair. From the corner of the room, the slow ticking of a clock echoed with dreadful deliberation. Each beat underscored the oppressive silence that choked the space. Outside, a bitter wind whistled through the cracks of the neglected window, its weary groan like mournful whispers drifting through the dark. The thin curtain quivered, its shadow swaying on the wall like a ghost haunting the past. This had once been Anna's haven, a place where, every evening, the soft glow of the yellow light had lit up family dinners, the laughter of 2 souls mingling with the aroma of meals she prepared with care. But now, the space was left with nothing but coldness and ruin. Every corner seemed to hold a residue of what had been lost: love, connection, and promises that had quietly crumbled. Amidst the room, Anna stood frozen, her vacant gaze fixed on the untouched apple pie resting in her hands. Its warmth seeped through the plate in a feeble attempt to fight the cold spreading through her chest. But nothing could fill the void stretching ever wider between her and the man sitting across from her. Michael slouched back in his chair, his posture detached and weary. One hand idly cradled an empty wine glass, spinning it in absent-minded circles. The harsh white light accentuated the rigid, unyielding lines of his face, as though every trace of warmth and affection had long since drained from him. His shadow stretched across the floor, merging with the encroaching darkness swallowing the room. The wind whistled again through the window, its mournful tone like a lament from somewhere far away. The clock ticked on, as if counting down the final moments before everything collapsed. Anna exhaled a soft, fractured breath, the sound dissolving into the vast emptiness between them. She looked at Michael, her eyes brimming with unspoken fear and pain. The room was a bleak portrait of a marriage at its end, where 2 people who had once loved each other now sat as strangers, silently staring into the abyss of their helplessness and despair. Anna stood still in the middle of the room, her small, fragile figure seeming to dissolve into the surrounding cold. She was about 35, her delicate features hollowed by the weight of exhaustion. Her warm brown skin, a mark of natural beauty and resilience, appeared pale and muted under the harsh white light. Her hands, calloused and weathered, with neatly clipped nails and small cracks along her rough fingers, bore the evidence of a woman who worked tirelessly without complaint. Her naturally curly black hair was loosely tied at the nape of her neck, with a few stray strands falling gently across her gaunt, high cheekbones. Those strands seemed an attempt to hide the weariness etched into her face, but they could not obscure the thin, drawn lines of her features. Anna's large, dark eyes, once filled with pride and affection, now held only worry and despair. Her gaze lingered on Michael, waiting, searching for something a response. A flicker of warmth like before, but all she found was his ruthless indifference. The simple, faded blue dress she wore was frayed at the hem, hugging her slender frame. Her appearance was so unassuming it nearly blended into the bleakness of the room. Yet it was this simplicity that made Anna seem even more real and pitiable, like a woman who had poured every ounce of herself into her family, only to forget herself in the process. Opposite her, Michael was the complete contrast. He lounged back in his chair, his long legs sprawled arrogantly over the edge of the dining table. Under the pallid light, his pale skin appeared all the more lifeless. His wrinkled white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, revealed the sharp line of his collarbone. One hand loosely held a half-empty wine bottle, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing its surface, a habit as unconscious as it was careless. Michael's face bore the marks of fatigue, but his eyes remained sharp and cold, almost disdainful. His gray gaze swept over Anna without pausing, as though she were invisible. A bitter half-smile curled on his lips, while his other hand tapped rhythmically against the table. The hollow sound echoed through the room, each beat ticking like a countdown to the moment he would lose his patience entirely. The two of them sat at opposite ends of the table. Anna, the small, brown-skinned woman desperately clinging to the remnants of a shattered marriage. Michael, the apathetic, empty shell of a man already prepared to turn his back on everything. The room suddenly felt far too large, far too quiet, as though it were swallowing them whole. Anna sat there, small and silent in the cold room, her dark eyes filled with worry, fixed on Michael, as though searching for a fragile remnant of warmth still lingering in the man before her. Her hands worn rough and calloused from years of caring for her family, trembled slightly, fingers interlacing beneath the old wooden table. The gesture was hesitant, shaky, like the fear and unease rising in her chest, desperate to be held back before spilling over. She lowered her gaze, eyes flickering with anxiety, looking down at the still warm apple pie resting in the center of the table. Its faint aroma lingered in the suffocating air, a last, feeble effort to rekindle a warmth long extinguished, when their happy days had been more than just distant memories. "I made your favorite apple pie," Anna whispered, her voice soft and fragile, like a breeze slipping through a winter night. But every word carried a quiet tremor, as though speaking any louder might shatter everything into pieces. She lifted her head, her eyes heavy with hope and fear, clinging desperately to something slipping through her grasp. "I thought, maybe we could spend some time together, like we used to." Her voice faltered at the end, a quiet quiver betraying the disbelief in her own words. Yet she clung stubbornly to the fading fragments of the days when they had loved each other fully. Michael sat motionless in his wooden chair, a picture of indifference and detachment. He didn't bother to lift his head, not even a glance to acknowledge the woman sitting across from him. His hand continued to turn the empty wine bottle in slow, idle circles, as though he were lost in thoughts far removed from the room, from Anna, from her every effort. His cold, gray eyes stared blankly at the bottle, as though seeking some form of escape in the last drops of wine clinging to its bottom. After what felt like an eternity of silence, he suddenly let out a short, harsh laugh, a sound dry and sharp, filled with bitterness, echoing in the dim room like the blade of a knife slicing through the heavy stillness. "Spend time together?" Michael finally lifted his head, his sharp, empty gaze locking onto Anna. That look made her feel smaller than ever, as though his stare alone could erase all her fragile efforts. He smirked, the cruel curve of his lips stretching across his face, making his words even sharper, even more ruthless. "You're so naive, Anna. Honestly. I don't even know how I managed to put up with you for this long." The words, as cutting as a blade, fell cold and venomous, severing the suffocating air like a merciless strike, tearing apart the last, fragile hope Anna had clung to. She froze, her body rigid as though turned to ice in that very moment. Her wide, dark eyes reflected the raw hurt buried deep in her chest, now rising to the surface and spilling over. Her hands, still clasped together beneath the table, began to shake violently, her fingers digging into the stained white tablecloth, gripping it as though it were the only thing left to hold on to amid the wreckage surrounding her. her breath caught, tight and shallow, as though every inhale threatened to break her apart. When she finally found her voice, it was no more than a faint whisper, too weak to carry through the silence. Her head dipped slightly, and her small shoulders began to tremble, like a fragile branch trying to withstand the full fury of a storm. Michael absent-mindedly spun the wine bottle in his hand again, the sound of glass scraping against the wood echoing in low, grating tones, a cruel emphasis on his indifference. His face remained blank, his icy gaze utterly devoid of care for the woman sitting just feet away. The clock on the wall ticked on, its rhythm suddenly loud and piercing, each beat marking the slow, inevitable march toward an end. The room seemed, all at once, unbearably vast, a dark void stretching out to consume Anna whole, leaving her alone with the crushing weight of her isolation and the pain squeezing tightly around her fragile heart. The room seemed to shrink bit by bit, the four walls closing in, suffocating the space until Anna could feel every rapid, pounding beat of her heart reverberating in her chest. The sound of it echoed in her ears, mixing with her own uneven breaths, leaving her dizzy. Her dark eyes, once gentle and bright, now reflected a profound pain, raw, desperate, and pleading. She stared at Michael, fixing her gaze on the man sitting across from her, as though she were trying to find something familiar, something of the person she had once loved and trusted. But all she met was an invisible wall of coldness. Michael sat there, indifferent and frigid, his sharp, empty stare cutting into her like a razor soulless, yet so piercing it felt as though it could tear straight through her heart, leaving a wound so deep it would never heal. "You mean nothing to me anymore." Michael's voice dropped, low and heavy, like a boulder crushing the already suffocating air. Every word he spat out carried a searing, bitter hatred of venomous emotion that had festered for far too long, now erupting into a fire that burned everything in its path. "I'm sick of looking at your pathetic face every day. Even the sound of you breathing drives me insane, Anna. Just seeing you makes me feel sick to my stomach." The words hit her like a sledgehammer, making her entire body tremble instinctively. Anna flinched, her wide eyes snapping open as though she'd been slapped. Her cracked, dry lips quivered, as if searching for a response, some way to fight back against the cruelty of his words. But no sound came. Her voice lodged in her throat, suffocated by the tidal wave of horror and pain. She stood there, frozen, her body paralyzed, while the echoes of Michael's cutting words reverberated through her mind, slicing deep like jagged knives. Suddenly, bang! The sound of the wine bottle slamming down onto the table shattered the silence, sharp and violent, as though it had ripped through the air itself. The noise crashed through the room like thunder on a clear day, freezing everything in its tracks. The empty bottle jolted, bounced slightly, then rolled toward the edge of the table, leaving a chilling skid mark before coming to an ominous stop. Michael sprang to his feet, the suddenness of the movement explosive, filled with a rage that seemed barely contained. Anna flinched, stumbling back instinctively, her wide eyes filled with terror. Her breath escaped in short, panicked gasps. Her knees struck the wooden chair behind her with a sharp thud, the sound slicing through the room. The chair toppled to the floor with a screeching crash, its echo jarring and deafening, like an alarm bell ringing through the darkness. Anna froze in place, her trembling hands clutching desperately at the edge of the table to steady herself, to keep from collapsing completely. No matter how hard she tried to hold it back, her small shoulders quivered violently, her frail frame unable to fight the overwhelming fear coursing through her. Michael stood there, his entire body tense and rigid, like a wire pulled so taut it was on the verge of snapping. He didn't look at her. His pale, lifeless eyes were fixed on the table, drilling holes into the wood as though trying to burn through it. His hand still gripped the neck of the bottle, his fingers wrapped so tightly around the glass they had turned white, as though he were trying to crush it into shards. His breath came heavy and ragged, hissing through his teeth, like a man battling the furious storm raging within him, struggling not to explode again. The room remained steeped in that terrifying silence, thick and suffocating, as if it were squeezing the very air out of the space. But this time, it was no longer an empty void. The silence hung like a heavy velvet curtain, poised to rise and reveal a truth so raw, so cruel, that it could tear apart any last fragile shred of hope left behind. Michael stood still, his tall frame tense and rigid, shoulders drawn tight like a wire on the verge of snapping. His face was expressionless, but his eyes, those sharp, gray eyes, like rusted steel pierced forward with a nameless emotion, a mix of contempt and exhaustion. He lifted his gaze to Anna, and in that moment, the carefully constructed facade he had worn like a mask was ripped away. There was no restraint left in his voice. It was a weapon now deadly, cutting and merciless, aimed straight at Anna with the precision of an arrow she could never avoid. "I found someone else," Michael said, each word deliberate and slow, as heavy as stones, as sharp as nails. He let the sentence hang, savoring the cruelty in its delivery, while his empty, icy gaze fixed on her with bone-chilling finality. "Sophia. She's young, beautiful, and not a pathetic burden like you." The words landed like a bomb, detonating in Anna's mind, leaving behind a deafening, destructive silence. They struck with such brutal force, so sudden and unrelenting, it felt like a sledgehammer driving straight into her chest, shattering what little remained of her fragile hope. Anna froze, her entire body rigid, her wide eyes swimming with disbelief and unfathomable pain. Her lips moved, as though searching for a response, a protest, but no sound came. The words choked in her throat, strangled by the overwhelming tide of agony. A shallow, broken breath escaped her lungs, so heavy and strained it felt like the last bit of air being ripped away. Her dark eyes, which had once held so much love, were now filled only with despair, horror, and the profound ache of betrayal. Tears welled at the corners, a flood she could no longer hold back, but Anna bit her lip, forcing herself to swallow the pain clinging to that last, trembling shred of pride she had left. She stood there, her legs trembling so violently it was as if they might give out beneath her, but she fought to keep her voice from breaking. "Michael," she whispered, his name soft and pleading, a desperate cry that fell helplessly into the frozen air. "What are you saying? We've been through so much together, all the hardest things, and now you just..." Her voice faltered, growing weaker, drowning in the bitterness of despair as her eyes met his eyes, so unfamiliar, so cold and lifeless, as though the man before her was no longer a man but a hollow shell of someone she once knew. Michael said nothing. He simply stood there, staring at her with a gaze so blank, so impenetrable, it was as if his heart had turned to stone. There was no longer any care left in him, no patience spared for her existence. To him, Anna was nothing more than an annoyance, an unwelcome presence in a room he no longer wished to share. Anna drew in a deep, trembling breath, struggling to steady herself amid the storm raging inside her. She took a step toward him, each movement slow and heavy, as though she were walking across a sheet of fragile ice that could shatter at any moment. When she was just a few feet away, she reached out, her small, worn hands roughened by years of sacrifice gently pressing against his arm, a final, desperate attempt to hold onto something that was already slipping beyond her reach. "Michael, please." Her voice broke then, soft and trembling, barely more than a whisper lost in the vast emptiness around them. "Don't do this. Don't do this to me." But her touch seemed to ignite something volatile in him, as though she had struck a match to a barrel of powder. Michael's eyes flashed with rage and disgust, and he jerked his arm away with such force, it was as if even the slightest contact with her repulsed him beyond reason. "Don't touch me," he roared, his voice cracking like a whip through the air, sharp and merciless. The violent motion threw Anna completely off balance. She stumbled backward, her legs colliding with the fallen wooden chair beneath her. In a single, devastating moment, her slender frame crumpled, collapsing like a frail branch battered by a relentless storm. The harsh sound of her body striking the wooden floor echoed through the room, a sharp, unforgiving crack that shattered what little calm remained. The chair rattled, splintering with a jarring snap that lingered in the air like the toll of a final, brutal warning. Anna sat there on the cold, unforgiving floor, her shaking hands pressed against the wooden boards to steady herself. Her dark curls fell loose around her face, concealing half of her pale, gaunt features. Slowly, she looked up, her tear-streaked face tilted toward Michael, her eyes pleading, raw with heartbreak and disbelief. She searched for something, anything left of what they had once shared. A look, a flicker, even a shadow of the man she loved. But Michael had already turned his back to her, his form as rigid and unmoving as a stone wall. The final door he had kept open for her now slammed shut forever. Once again, silence enveloped the room. But this silence was different, vast, endless, a black void that pulled Anna deeper and deeper into its depths, drowning her in its hopelessness. The steady ticking of the clock echoed through the empty air, each beat pounding like a hammer against her heart, stretching her suffering into an eternity that had no escape. Once again, the room was engulfed in silence, so dense it seemed to drain the air from the space. A coldness blanketed everything, leaving only the steady ticking of the clock, a merciless hammer striking Anna's heart with each beat. She collapsed onto the floor, trembling hands clutching the hem of her dress, silent tears falling onto the cold wooden boards. Michael stood motionless, tall and rigid, his cold gaze fixed on Anna, as if she were nothing more than a discarded object. His words, sharper than any blade, pierced through her. "I never loved you," he said, his voice calm yet cutting. "I stayed because I had no other choice, but now I do." Anna lifted her head, her wide eyes filled with anguish and disbelief, her breath caught in her throat. She looked at Michael, searching for some flicker of regret or humanity, but found only detachment. He turned and walked away. The door opened, letting in a gust of cold wind that sent the tablecloth fluttering. The sound of the door slamming shut reverberated through the air, a definitive end to everything. Anna crumpled to the floor, her hands clutching her head, tears streaming down her face. Sob after sob broke free, tangled with shallow, ragged breaths, her shoulders trembling as though she might shatter. Yet in the depths of her tear-streaked eyes, a faint glimmer appeared, fragile but razor-sharp, like a blade forged in the fire of her pain. Time seemed to stand still, though the clock continued its indifferent ticking, a cold reminder that life went on. The faint morning light filtered through the curtains, casting pale gray lines across the floor. Outside, a bird sang, its notes lost in the heavy, oppressive air. Anna sat on the sofa, dark circles under her sleepless eyes, staring at the wooden shelf where dust-covered wedding photos rested. In one frame, she and Michael beamed with joy on their wedding day, their hands clasped tightly outside the church, their eyes brimming with hope. Now those memories mocked her. A soft breeze drifted through the window, rustling the curtains, and one photo tilted with a faint sound. Startled, Anna blinked, her vacant gaze snapping into focus. The past and present seemed to collide, pressing down on her chest like a crushing weight. She took a deep breath, but it snagged in her throat. The emptiness of this morning felt heavier than the darkness of the night before. The fragile resolve she had clung to now faltered, blocked by Michael's final words that tore open a wound, raw and unrelenting. The old clock ticked on, its rhythm an unfeeling reminder that time wouldn't stop, no matter how much she wished it would. Anna wondered if she could escape this suffocating shadow or if she was doomed to sink deeper into it. The sky outside was bleak, heavy gray clouds threatening rain. Anna's gaze shifted to the window, her fingers gripping the armrest of the sofa as if trying to draw strength from its solidity. Would today be just another meaningless day passing her by, or the start of confronting herself? She closed her eyes, her breath shallow and quick, as though preparing for an unwinnable battle. The room was stifling in its silence, broken only by the pounding of her heart. And in that silence, something stirred, not just pain, but a beginning. Would Anna rise above the darkness or sink further into its depths? The choice was hers to make, and her journey began here. The living room was steeped in the pale light of a gray morning. Weak sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting faint streaks across the floor, like a white shroud draped over a lifeless space. The room was cold and desolate, as though time itself had settled like a fine layer of dust over everything. The vast, empty silence felt suffocating, as if the house had ceased to breathe long ago. On the wooden shelf against the wall, wedding photographs of Anna and Michael remained untouched, but they no longer evoked happiness. Instead, they stood as painful relics of a marriage that had collapsed. In the largest frame, Anna and Michael beamed with radiant smiles, their faces alight with trust and hope. Eyes that once gleamed with love now seemed reduced to ashes. The photo hung like a cruel reminder, suspended between past and present, a ghost refusing to fade. From outside, the faint sound of birdsong drifted in intermittent and lonely cutting through the heavy silence. Once a symbol of a new day, it now only deepened the meaninglessness of the morning. Anna lay curled up on the worn-out sofa at the center of the room. The faded fabric sagged beneath her, sunken in the spots she most often sat, as though it had memorized the small, solitary curve of her body. In her hands, she clutched a cold wedding photo frame to her chest. She stared at it blankly, her eyes distant and hollow, devoid of life. Her roughened fingers traced the edges of the frame slowly, almost hauntingly, as if trying to hold onto the shattered memories within it. Her face was pale, dark circles shadowing her tired eyes, and her dry lips trembled, forming invisible words she could not bring herself to speak. Anna seemed disconnected from time, no longer tethered to reality. She simply sat there, consumed by the crushing weight of emptiness and grief. Suddenly, ding-dong. The doorbell rang sharply, slicing through the dead silence like a blade. The sound was jarring, cold, and piercing, and startled Anna out of her trance. Her hands tightened around the photo frame instinctively, nearly dropping it as her chest tightened, her breathing quick and shallow. For a moment the silence crept back in, but now it felt heavier, more suffocating than before. Anna exhaled deeply, the sigh heavy with exhaustion and resignation, as though she were dragging her broken body and weary soul back to the present. Slowly, she set the frame back on the table, her fingertips grazing the glass one final time before letting go. Her bare feet touched the cold wooden floor, and she rose unsteadily, each step slow and deliberate, dragging her weight across the room toward the door. The doorbell rang again, louder, more insistent, urging her forward. Anna paused in front of the door, her hand resting on the doorknob but not turning it just yet. She drew in a deep, trembling breath, the kind that takes all of one's strength, as though bracing herself to confront whatever waited on the other side. Anna lay motionless on the worn-out sofa, her small body curled in on itself, as if trying to hide from the world. Her eyes, swollen and red after a night of tears, now felt dry and raw, leaving behind a hollow emptiness that defied description. Her trembling fingers traced the edge of the wedding photo resting on her lap, their frail touch following the lines of the frame. In the photo, Michael and her, they were smiling brightly, as if they had never known pain, betrayal, or separation. Anna's expression was blank, her lifeless eyes staring at the frame but not truly seeing it. Her gaze was distant, as though her soul had drifted somewhere far away, to a place where memories still shimmered with warmth and the sharp edges of heartbreak had yet to carve their way into her heart. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, tearing through the suffocating silence. Anna flinched, her frail shoulders giving a small, involuntary shudder. Her hands clutched the photo tightly, but then, slowly, so slowly, she set it down on the table beside her. The movement was so gentle it was almost weak, as though the photo were a fragile shard she might shatter further if she wasn't careful. Her breaths grew heavier as the doorbell rang again, urgent now, insistent in its demand. Anna rose, her bare feet meeting the icy chill of the wooden floor. Her steps were slow and dragging, weighed down by exhaustion and the emptiness that clung to her like a shroud. When she opened the door, a rush of cold air swept through the room, stirring the thin curtains as though the wind itself were mourning. Sarah stood there, her face etched with worry and determination. She wore a light brown coat, her chestnut hair pulled neatly back, and her eyes filled with both resolve and sorrow locked onto Anna with quiet intensity. "Anna." Sarah's voice was soft but firm, its weight carrying far more than the single word. Without waiting for a response, she stepped into the room, her shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor. She came to a stop in front of Anna, saying nothing at first. Instead, she reached out, placing a warm, steady hand on her friend's thin shoulder. Anna flinched instinctively, pulling her shoulder back as though recoiling from the touch. But the warmth of Sarah's hand lingered, slowly dissolving her resistance, as though some of the burden she carried had shifted, if only a little. Sarah leaned down, her eyes meeting Anna's, a pair of eyes swollen, bloodshot, and void of all light. "Look at me, Anna," Sarah said, her voice firm yet gentle, her concern unmistakable. Her gaze burned with a quiet strength, a lifeline reaching into the darkness where Anna had been drowning for so long. "You can't keep doing this to yourself. I won't let you disappear like this." Anna didn't answer. Her lashes fluttered slightly, her gaze still distant, as though Sarah's words were little more than a breeze, unable to touch her. But Sarah didn't falter. Her hand tightened slightly on Anna's shoulder, her determination unwavering, her eyes pleading yet resolute like a tether straining to pull her friend back from the edge of despair. The room remained cold and dim, still and heavy, as though time had stopped. Yet Sarah's presence brought a flicker of warmth, faint but resolute, pushing against the icy stillness. The clock ticked steadily, each beat a reminder of time's unyielding march. Outside, the wind murmured faintly through the window cracks. Sarah entered the living room, her worried eyes scanning the gray, lifeless space before settling on Anna, motionless on the faded sofa. Anna was a shadow of herself, fragile and broken, fading into the cold air around her. "Anna." "No," Sarah said softly, her voice a careful blend of gentleness and concern. "I heard. Are you okay?" Anna didn't respond. Her empty eyes stayed fixed on the blank wall ahead, as though her soul had withdrawn, leaving only a hollow shell. Shoulders trembling under her loose gray sweater, she finally whispered, her voice faint and brittle. "I don't know." Everything fell apart so quickly, like a gust of wind, and then nothing. Her words hung in the cold air, heavy with despair. Sarah sat beside her, silent but determined. She reached out, clasping Anna's icy fingers in her warm, steady hand. Anna flinched but slowly, almost instinctively, curled her trembling hand around Sarah's. "You can't stay like this," Sarah said, firm yet compassionate. "He's not worth it. You have to get up, Anna. Do you hear me? Your life isn't his to ruin." Anna shivered at her words. Tears welled, hot and uncontrollable, streaming down her pale cheeks. "What did I do wrong, Sarah?" She sobbed, her voice breaking. "Why did he leave me? I gave everything. And it still wasn't enough." Sarah tightened her grip on Anna's hand, her tone unwavering. "You did nothing wrong. His leaving was his choice, not your fault. But now, you need to show him and yourself that your life doesn't revolve around him. You're stronger than this. Sarah leaned closer, her gaze piercing. You are stronger than you think. Don't let him take away the best parts of you. Anna's tear-filled eyes met Sarah's. The pain remained, raw and overwhelming, but somewhere within, a flicker of hope emerged, small and trembling but unmistakable. The room fell silent, no longer empty or hopeless, but filled with the quiet promise of a new beginning. Anna sat there, her face streaked with tears, but something in her gaze had begun to shift just slightly. She lowered her head, her trembling hands reaching for the wedding photo frame resting on the table. Her fingers skimmed the glass surface, brushing against the image of herself and Michael in their wedding attire. The coldness of the glass sent a shiver through her, a stark reminder of the harsh reality that lay before her. Her grip on the frame tightened hard, as if clinging to it could somehow preserve the past that was slipping further and further away. But then, the tension in her hands began to release. Anna closed her eyes, a heavy breath escaping her chest. Slowly, she set the frame back down on the table, the movement gentle yet deliberate, as though she had finally let go of a burden that had weighed on her heart for so long. Her face no longer seemed completely consumed by despair. Sarah's words lingered in her mind like the soft chiming of a bell, piercing through the fragile shell of her grief. Anna's gaze fell to her hands that had once built a life, nurtured a marriage, held so much hope, and yet now they grasped only emptiness. You have to get up. You're stronger than you think. Sarah's voice echoed within her, each word sinking in deeper, driving back the darkness that had surrounded her for so long. Anna wiped the lingering tears from her cheeks with a faint, unsteady motion. Her lashes fluttered as she blinked away the haze clouding her vision. When she opened her eyes again, they were still pained, but beneath that sorrow, something else had begun to surface, a flicker of awakening. Sarah stood up then, watching Anna carefully before making her way toward the door. She said nothing more, because she knew the words had already been spoken. Now, it was up to Anna. As Sarah turned to leave, her shadow stretched long across the floor, blending into the pale light filtering through the curtains. Anna watched her go, her expression quiet, but her eyes reflected a spark of something new, a fragile determination beginning to take shape. Anna straightened slightly, her hands gripping the edge of her dress, as if anchoring herself to the thought slowly taking root in her mind. I can't let this destroy me. The words formed in her head, resolute and clear, like a quiet vow to herself. A soft breeze stirred the thin curtains, letting in more light from outside, casting a faint glow on part of Anna's face. In that silent space, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Anna sensed something different. It was delicate, fragile like the first sprout pushing through cracked, barren earth, but it was enough. Enough to hold on to fight for. I won't let this break me, she told herself, her gaze lifting toward the unseen future waiting before her. Her shoulders no longer hunched inward quite so tightly, though the weight of the pain still lingered. The room remained still, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was no longer the silence of endless despair, but a pause, a quiet moment of preparation for whatever lay ahead. A new beginning, uncertain and fraught with difficulty, but no longer resigned to defeat. Anna sat still on the sofa for a moment longer, her gaze fixed on the empty space before her, but her mind had finally stopped drifting back to the past. A long breath escaped her lips, soft, but carrying with it the remnants of a sorrow that had lingered far too long. At last she stood up. Her movements were slow but steady, as though for the first time in what felt like forever, she was reclaiming control of herself. The room remained silent, its stillness broken only by the faint light filtering through the thin curtains, scattering uneven patterns of light and shadow across the walls. Anna walked toward the desk by the window. The wooden chair groaned softly beneath her as she sat down, Her fingers, trembling slightly, traced the cool surface of the desk before stopping at the laptop, now covered in a thin layer of dust. How long had it been since she touched it? Anna wondered, but stopped herself before that thought could pull her under again. She reached forward, slowly lifting the lid of the laptop. The faint creak of the hinge sounded like the stirring of something long dormant. The screen glowed to life in the dim room, its pale blue light illuminating Anna's gaunt face and swollen eyes. Her hands hovered above the keyboard, her fingertips trembling just slightly, as though still unsure. But then Anna took a deep breath and let her hands rest on the keys, a quiet determination sparking within her like a fragile flame in the dark. The empty search bar appeared on the screen, its blinking cursor waiting. Anna clicked, the pointer steady now as it hovered. She typed one word, then another. The soft tapping of the keys broke the silence, hesitant at first, but then growing steadier, more deliberate, like the rhythm of a heart finding its pulse again. On the screen, results began to appear beneath the search for new jobs. Anna's gaze focused intently, and for the first time in days, her eyes weren't vacant or distant. There was something new in them, a flicker of hope, small but unmistakable, as though she were whispering to herself, "I will start again." From here. Outside the window, the gray clouds still blanketed the sky, but somewhere, a faint sliver of sunlight broke through the heavy layer, casting a soft glow against the glass, a quiet signal that the storm was beginning to pass. The sound of keystrokes filled the room, steady and determined, a small but resolute rhythm, the sound of Anna taking her first steps forward. Slow, difficult, but certain, the sound of change beginning. A week had passed. Time, like a slow-moving current, flowed steadily on, carrying with it the sharpest edges of Anna's pain, softening it as if healing a wound that had just begun to scar over. The soft clack of keyboard keys in that cold, silent room had become the rhythm of a new beginning, a small but determined act pulling Anna back from the brink that had almost swallowed her whole. Those first days weren't easy. There were moments when she sat motionless in front of the screen, her hands trembling as she scrolled through endless job listings she never imagined she would have to consider. But this time, she refused to let herself turn back. The pale sunlight of the first morning of her second week broke through the thick gray clouds, an unspoken invitation for Anna to step out of that stifling room. She pulled on an old sweater, slipped her feet into a pair of worn flats, and stepped outside, clutching a carefully prepared resume in her bag, a small item, but one that carried tremendous weight. And so, Anna found herself standing in front of a small bookstore tucked away in the old quarter. Sunlight streamed through the spotless glass windows, casting a soft golden glow on the antique wooden shelves inside. The faint smell of old paper, timeless and steeped in forgotten stories, drifted through the air, peaceful and inviting, as though beckoning her into a world that had never lost its value. Anna inhaled deeply, her thin shoulders relaxing slightly. In that brief moment, perhaps for the first time, she felt something different, fragile, but real, a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild her life from the scattered remnants of what had been. Inside, Margaret, the bookstore's owner, was busy arranging a stack of newly arrived books. Her hands moved delicately over the spines, brushing away lingering specks of dust, her eyes focused and reverent, as though each book held a treasure only she could appreciate. The soft chime of the doorbell broke the quiet when Anna stepped in, and in the warmth of that golden morning light, something new flickered in her eyes, a faint but unmistakable resolve. Could this door be another turning point in Anna's life? Could she find something here, among these aging shelves, work, a fresh beginning, or even a forgotten part of herself? The answer waited ahead, unknown and uncertain, but at least this time, Anna had chosen to keep moving forward. The door eased shut behind her, the small bell above ringing again, a gentle, cautious greeting. Anna stood there, gripping the straps of her bag, her shoulders trembling slightly, as if still unsure of this step she had taken. But the atmosphere of the shop enveloped her almost instantly. Warmth settled around her like a comforting old quilt draped over a cold, weary day. Sunlight filtered through the large front windows, streaks of pale gold spilling across the time-worn wooden floor. Light danced across its cracks and crevices, glinting off the tall shelves that lined the walls. Each book rested quietly in its place, spines lined up like soldiers, their colors a tapestry of muted browns and deep reds, vibrant blues and greens, a perfect balance of life and stillness. The scent of aged paper lingered in the air, thick with time, memory, and stories yet untold, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee drifting from a cozy corner of the shop. Anna's eyes moved toward a small wooden table by the window, where two velvet-cushioned chairs sat, faded but sturdy, as though they had weathered years of quiet company. Overhead, an old ceiling fan turned lazily, its rhythmic motion pulling the shop away from the rush of the outside world, creating a stillness that felt strangely sacred. Anna froze at the threshold, her soft flats barely making a sound against the creaking floorboards. Hesitation gripped her, a familiar weight pressing against her chest. It felt as though stepping further inside might be too big of a step for someone still piecing herself back together. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, letting the calming scent of books and coffee steady the wild rhythm of her heart. When she opened them again, her gaze fell on the shelves, rows upon rows of sturdy, unmoving walls that felt, somehow, like quiet guardians of forgotten lives. In that instant, something shifted within Anna, something gentle but profound. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sliver of comfort, a faint peace curling at the edges of her mind like an old friend she'd forgotten. The books seemed to whisper to her, soft and soothing, as if to say, "Here, you'll be all right. Can I help you with something?" The unexpected voice startled Anna, pulling her back into the moment. She turned quickly to see a middle-aged woman stepping out from behind one of the shelves. It was Margaret, the bookstore's owner. Her short white hair framed her face, and a pair of thin-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. She wore a cream sweater under a worn brown apron, her expression serious but not unkind. Her sharp eyes studied Anna, though there was something soft, something knowing in her gaze. Anna stammered, her fingers tightening on the straps of her bag. I'm looking for a job." She steadied her voice, though there was still a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "I heard you needed help around the shop." Margaret didn't respond right away. She regarded Anna carefully, her gaze lingering on the gaunt face and weary figure before her. A moment passed, filled only with the slow creak of the ceiling fan and the faint hum of distant traffic outside. "Do you have any experience?" Margaret asked finally, her voice even but not unkind. Anna shook her head, her shoulders shrinking slightly, but her eyes unwavering. "I've never worked in a bookstore before," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "But I love books, and I'm willing to learn. I'll do anything you need me to do." There was quiet determination in her words and earnestness Margaret couldn't ignore. Margaret raised an eyebrow, as though considering her answer. Slowly, she moved to a nearby shelf, picked up a worn leather-bound book, and dusted it off before placing it gently on the table beside her. "People who love books can't be all bad," she said at last, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "But you'll have to prove that to me. Come back tomorrow morning at 8. We'll see if you're a good fit." Anna's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across her face. "Really? Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet, young lady," Margaret replied, her voice still carrying a hint of sternness. But there was warmth in her eyes now, a quiet kindness that softened her sharp edges. "Work here isn't as easy as it looks. But if you're patient, maybe I'll teach you a thing or two." Anna nodded, a faint but genuine smile breaking across her lips, her first in what felt like forever. As Margaret turned back to her work, arranging the stack of books on the shelf, Anna lingered for a moment longer. She let her eyes wander once more across the shop, gratitude and emotion welling up inside her as she took it all in. The nervousness she'd felt earlier had begun to ebb away. In its place was something new, a spark of hope, faint but bright. This wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a beginning. A beginning she would hold on to with everything she had left. Anna stepped into the bookstore, the wooden door creaking softly as it swung open, followed by the delicate chime of the bell above, a sound that rang out, lingering in the stillness. Her slender fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, digging gently into the worn fabric as though to steady herself. Her eyes darted across the warm, antiquated space. Rows of dark wooden shelves stretched neatly toward the ceiling, each lined with old books that sat in silence, as if deep in slumber, their pages exuding the comforting scent of paper and time. She drew in a deep breath, letting the air fill her chest, as though to anchor herself to this quiet, timeless place. The slow, rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan blended with the quickening beat of her heart, a steady sound that did little to calm the nervous energy swelling inside her. "You can do this. Just keep walking," she told herself. Her legs felt heavy, but her steps were deliberate as she moved toward the counter. Behind the counter stood Margaret, her short silver hair framing her stern face. She was sorting through a stack of newly delivered books, her hands moving with practiced precision as she dusted the covers, a habitual care that spoke of years spent tending to her shop. When the sound of Anna's approaching footsteps reached her, Margaret looked up. Her sharp eyes, magnified slightly behind round glasses, fixed on Anna with an unflinching gaze, taking her in from head to toe without a word. Margaret's cold, appraising stare felt like a stone wall barring Anna's path. For a fleeting moment, her fingers trembled where they gripped the strap of her bag. The tentative smile that had begun to form on her lips faltered, flickering out like a flame in the wind. Anxiety flashed briefly in her eyes, but Anna refused to let it take hold. She inhaled deeply once more, forcing her parched lips into a small, hesitant smile, awkward but earnest. "Good morning." Anna's voice broke the silence, the first words coming out hoarse before she steadied herself. "My name is Anna. I came because I heard you're looking for someone to help around the bookstore." Margaret remained silent for a moment longer, her gaze unwavering, unblinking. Her expression betrayed nothing beyond quiet scrutiny, leaving Anna to shift ever so slightly under the weight of it. Straightening her posture, Anna instinctively squared her narrow shoulders, as though trying to shield herself from the doubt and insecurity curling at the edges of her mind. Her hands, no longer clutching her bag, settled gently in front of her, fingers interlacing as she waited, her resolve holding firm. The room remained bathed in the pale gold light of early morning as the sun inched its way above the horizon. Its gentle rays filtered through the large window, scattering across the worn wooden floor, catching flecks of dust suspended in the still air like tiny, glimmering specks frozen in time. The space was peaceful yet steeped in an undercurrent of quiet tension as Margaret stood behind the old wooden counter, her stern gaze fixed on Anna. She watched the young woman carefully, as though trying to pierce through her fragile shell, scrutinizing every word, every breath, every slight movement. The silence stretched on, dragging time with it, making Anna feel as though she were standing on thin ice. Her narrow shoulders instinctively hunched, but somewhere deep within, a faint ember of courage began to stir. Anna bit her lower lip, the determination in her dark brown eyes flickering to life. She drew in a long, steady breath, letting the scent of old paper and faint coffee fill her lungs, grounding her. Her thin fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, trembling briefly before loosening again, an unconscious gesture to steady the nerves clawing at her from the inside. "I'm looking for a job," Anna said finally, her voice breaking through the silence. At first, it wavered soft, tentative, like the faint chime of a bell, but as she spoke, it grew steadier. Her eyes met Margaret's unflinching gaze, earnest and quietly resolute, the fragile hope she carried reflected in them. "I love books, and I think this is where I need to start." Margaret didn't respond right away. She tilted her head slightly, her sharp eyes glinting behind round glasses, studying Anna with the kind of intensity that could peel back layers to reveal hidden truths. The faintest movement, a shift of her glasses higher up the bridge of her nose, was the only sign of thought before she finally spoke. Her voice was low and deliberate, tinged with authority, but not unkind. "Have you worked in a place like this before?" The question caught Anna slightly off guard. Her breath faltered for a moment, but honesty compelled her to shake her head. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face, as though bracing for rejection. But she steadied herself once more, determination battling against doubt. She couldn't let this moment slip away. "No, I haven't," Anna admitted, her voice soft but clear, each word carefully chosen as though she were carving them from stone. "But I'm willing to learn. I can do anything you need, organizing shelves, taking care of the shop, cleaning, or checking in new stock." She paused, her dark eyes glimmering with the faintest spark of hope before she continued. "I don't mind hard work. I just need a chance." Her words quickened near the end, as though she feared that if she stopped, the fragile thread of confidence she had woven might unravel completely. She held her breath then, her fingers briefly clenching and releasing, her pulse pounding in her ears like a drumbeat she couldn't quiet. The room seemed to grow even quieter, heavy with expectation. Margaret remained silent, her lips pressed together in thought as her discerning gaze swept over Anna once more, taking in every detail. And then, ever so faintly, the corners of Margaret's mouth lifted just slightly, a fleeting smile, light as a summer breeze brushing across a still gray sky. "You love books, do you?" Margaret asked, her tone softer now but laced with a quiet challenge. "Then tell me, which book has changed your life the most?" The question fell like a stone into the still waters of Anna's mind, leaving ripples of surprise. She blinked, her long lashes fluttering, as though sifting through memories she hadn't touched in a long time. But the answer came to her almost immediately. A gentle smile, tinged with nostalgia, curved her lips. "To Kill a Mockingbird." Anna replied softly, her voice sinking into the quiet like a confession she had kept locked away. "I read it when I was a child. It taught me about courage, about standing up for what's right, even when the world feels like it's against you." Her words hung in the air, quiet but resolute, carrying a weight far heavier than their simplicity suggested. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Margaret's sharp gaze lingered on Anna, though it had softened, as though she had found the answer she was searching for. Finally, Margaret nodded, a subtle but unmistakable gesture that shattered the tension gripping Anna's chest. Without a word, Margaret picked up a book from the counter, brushing dust from its spine with the same deliberate care she had shown every other book before it. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and steady, but carried an unmistakable finality. "All right," she said. "You can try. We'll start with the basics. Be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." The words rang out like a declaration, a promise, and for a moment, Anna couldn't believe she had heard them. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling as though caught between disbelief and the urge to smile. "Thank you. I promise I won't let you down," she said, her voice quiet but charged with a strength that felt like it came from deep within. Margaret didn't reply. She only shrugged slightly, turning back to the books waiting to be organized, though the ghost of a smile still lingered at the edge of her mouth. Anna stood still for a moment, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and gratitude. She looked around the shop once more, taking in the shelves, the warm golden light, and the quiet hum of this place she had just stepped into. The tension that had clung to her since she arrived seemed to ease, replaced by something else small, fragile, but unmistakably real hope. As she turned to leave, the wooden door creaked softly, the little bell chiming once more as she stepped through. Its sound rang out behind her, bright and lingering like a note of quiet celebration, a signal of something new beginning. Anna began her first day at the bookstore with a renewed sense of purpose and quiet determination. She donned the fabric apron Margaret had handed her, stepping toward the towering shelves with eyes that shimmered with wonder, like a child entering a world of magic. With careful hands, Anna removed each book from its place, wiping away the layers of dust that had gathered over time with a soft cloth. Every time the dust vanished, the book seemed to come alive, its cover gleaming as if granted new life. Though her hands trembled occasionally with fatigue and her back ached from bending over too long, Anna never stopped smiling. Some of the books reminded her of her childhood of memories tucked between the pages, and for a moment, she felt like she was reclaiming a tender part of herself that had been long forgotten. Day by day, Anna meticulously organized each book according to the categories Margaret had taught her. She spent hours learning how to sort them by genre, author, and placement so customers could find what they were looking for with ease. Sometimes she murmured the titles aloud, as if having quiet conversations with the books themselves. Now and then, she'd catch Margaret watching her from a distance. At first, Margaret's gaze remained stern and unreadable, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, it softened. Trust began to flicker in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of Anna's sincerity. Margaret was not the kind of woman to open up easily, but Anna's dedication and genuine love for the book stirred something within her. Anna never complained about the menial tasks or the long, exhausting days. Instead, she approached each duty with a reverence that made it seem as though the bookstore were sacred ground worth tending and protecting. One late afternoon, when the last golden rays of sunlight spilled through the window, casting long streaks across the worn wooden floor, Anna was stacking the final pile of books for the day when Margaret called to her. Her voice was soft, but it carried an unusual gravity. "Anna, come here for a moment." Anna flinched slightly, startled by the sudden break in the quiet. She looked up to see Margaret standing behind the counter, her hands clasped together, her face etched with an exhaustion she had always kept hidden. Quickly wiping the dust from her hands, Anna walked toward her, concern clouding her features. "What is it, Mrs. Margaret?" Anna asked softly, her voice laced with worry as she noticed the unusual stillness in the older woman's demeanor. Margaret held Anna's gaze for a long moment, as though weighing whether to say what was on her mind. Finally, with a heavy sigh, she spoke, her voice gravelly with age and burden. "Anna, I can't hide it from you any longer." Margaret began, her tone steady but tinged with sadness. "This bookstore won't be here much longer. A big company has its eye on this block. They want to buy the entire street, and I can't hold on to it anymore." Anna froze. Her eyes widened, the words hitting her like a blow to the chest. She looked around the shop, the towering wooden shelves, the colorful spines of books, the scent of old paper and faint coffee lingering in the air. This place, so warm and peaceful, could simply disappear? But Anna stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, choked by the ache rising in her throat. "But this place is wonderful. It's not just a bookstore, it's a refuge, a place where people find peace. How could they?" Margaret gave a small, sad smile, though it was devoid of joy. She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling faintly, as if the years of carrying the weight of this shop had finally begun to break her. "I know, Anna. I love this place too," Margaret said softly, her voice fraying at the edges. "But I'm just an old woman. I don't have the strength to fight them. The rent keeps climbing, and the company's offer. It's more than I can afford to refuse." Anna stood still, her heart sinking as she stared back at Margaret. Her gaze shifted to the rows of books behind her, as though they too were listening, silent witnesses to this quiet devastation. The endless shelves suddenly felt fragile, as if the entire shop might crumble under the weight of one more breath. "This can't be," Anna whispered, almost to herself, her fingers gripping the edge of the wooden counter so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her shoulders trembled slightly as she fought to steady herself. "There has to be another way. Something we can do to save this place." Margaret looked at Anna, her eyes reflecting a sorrow that ran deep, but there was something else there, too, something faint, like a tiny spark of hope. Perhaps she had given up long ago, but in Anna's steady, determined gaze, she saw the reflection of a younger version of herself. "You remind me of who I used to be," Margaret said quietly, her voice cracking under the weight of unspoken memories. "But life isn't like the stories in these books, Anna. Sometimes we have to learn how to let go." Anna met Margaret's gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line, but her dark eyes shone with something new afire, an unspoken resolve. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let this place she had just come to love vanish like smoke. "We'll figure something out," Anna said softly, but her voice carried a certainty that startled even her. "There's got to be a way." Margaret didn't respond right away. She only watched Anna for a long moment, as though testing the weight of her words. Outside the window, the light had dimmed, the fading twilight beginning to stretch shadows across the room. But in Anna's eyes, a small flame had been lit, frail but fiercely alive, unwilling to be extinguished. After the last customer left, and the soft chime of the bell had faded into silence, Anna sat quietly on the wooden chair by the window. The glow of the streetlights filtered through the foggy glass, casting flickering shadows on the worn wooden floor, shadows that seemed to mirror the tangled thoughts swirling in her mind. Outside, the old sign that read Margaret's Bookshop swayed gently in the wind, its faded letters a testament to the years it had weathered, holding on to the soul of the place. Anna sat still, her eyes fixed on the weathered sign as though trying to see a glimpse of the future hidden within its cracks. Then, a small spark ignited in her mind. Without hesitation, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn notebook. With a battered blue pen, she began to write quickly, and with conviction as ideas poured forth, each thought a lifeline. She wrote about ways to promote the bookstore, about hosting reading sessions for children and book lovers in the neighborhood. She scribbled ideas for community support, seeking donations, or even fundraising efforts. Her handwriting was hurried and untidy, but every word carried an unwavering belief that surprised even her. Anna knew she had nothing, no experience, no extra money, but what she did have was her will, her determination. She couldn't let a place so precious disappear without a fight. That night, in her tiny room, Anna sat alone on the edge of her bed. Beside her, a dim desk lamp cast a pale yellow light across her tired yet resolute face. Her phone screen lit up, displaying the meager balance of her savings money she had scraped together over years of hard work. Anna stared at the screen, her thumb brushing lightly against the numbers, as though making sure they were still real. She took a deep breath, filling her chest with the weight of both fear and resolve. Her eyes drifted toward the black void outside her window, where the night stretched on endlessly. The darkness could not reach the fire now burning inside her. "I've already lost everything," Anna thought, her inner voice clear and steady, both a reminder and a rallying cry. "But if I don't try, I'll regret it forever. If I do nothing, this bookstore will vanish, and I'll lose the last chance to do something right." Setting her phone down beside her, Anna closed her eyes briefly, letting the silence settle. When she opened them again, there was only resolve staring back at her from the dim reflection in the window. This time she would not back down. The next morning, sunlight broke through the gray clouds, spilling a thin warmth across the narrow street. Anna stepped into the bookstore, her footsteps purposeful, her heart steady. The wooden door creaked softly as it opened, and the bell chimed its familiar tune. This time, though, the sound rang out like a proclamation something was about to change. Behind the counter, Margaret stood with her reading glasses perched low on her nose, absorbed in the pages of an old book. She looked up when Anna entered, her brow furrowing slightly, as if to ask why she was there so early. Anna stopped in front of the counter, her hands gripping the straps of her bag, a familiar gesture of nerves, but her gaze was steady, brighter than it ever been. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice clear, firm, and edged with sincerity. "I'm going to help you save this bookstore." Margaret froze, surprise flashing across her face. She didn't interrupt, so Anna pressed on, her words picking up momentum, like a promise she couldn't, and wouldn't, take back. "We can do this, if you give me a chance. I've thought about it all night, and I know there's still a way. We can promote the store, host events, build connections with the community fundraisers, reading programs, whatever it takes. I'll do everything I can to help you." Margaret stared at Anna for a long moment, her expression unreadable. There was a faint flicker in her sharp eyes, something fragile, like a small ember glowing faintly in the ashes. Perhaps it was a hope she thought she'd long since buried. Slowly, her features softened, as though a part of her had begun to see something familiar in Anna's fiery resolve. Finally, Margaret set the book down on the counter and removed her glasses. She exhaled deeply, the sound weary but somehow lighter, like a weight she'd carried for years had shifted ever so slightly. "You really think we can do this?" Margaret asked, her voice low, careful a challenge to the fragile belief Anna carried. Anna nodded, her smile faint but brimming with certainty. "Yes, but we have to start now before it's too late." Margaret really looked at her, her discerning eyes softening as they held Anna's unwavering gaze. Silence stretched between them, and then Margaret gave a small nod, her lips quirking into the faintest of smiles. "All right, Anna," she said, her voice firm but no longer guarded. "Let's see what you can do." A smile broke across Anna's face, brighter than it had been in months. It wasn't just an agreement, it was the start of something. Outside the bookstore, the morning sunlight seemed to glow a little warmer, as though celebrating the quiet defiance of a girl who refused to let go. A year can change so much. A dying bookstore can find new life, and a woman who once thought herself defeated can rise again. For Anna, every day that passed was a battle, but with each book sold, each new customer who crossed the threshold, a little more light filled the cracks of her past. Margaret's bookshop, though still humble, became a symbol of perseverance and rebirth, not only for Anna but for Margaret as well, who finally began to believe that miracles sometimes emerged from the smallest of efforts. And yet, while Anna stood strong, somewhere far from the glow of that morning sun, darkness loomed over another life. In a high-rise apartment in the heart of the city, a space meant to be filled with luxury and brilliance, there was only emptiness and disarray. The thick curtains were drawn tight, allowing only slivers of pale light to filter through. On the floor, empty bottles of liquor lay scattered alongside boxes of stale pizza, the stench of decay lingering in the air. Dust settled on the expensive furniture, left untouched, mirroring the life of the man who had once sat at its peak but now teetered on the edge of ruin. The wind whistled through a cracked window, its ghostly sound weaving through the suffocating silence. In the center of it all, Michael sat slumped on the sofa, his head buried in his hands. His disheveled hair fell over a face that had grown gaunt and hollow, the sharp, confident features of the man he once was now reduced to shadows of a distant past. It had been a year since he left Anna, the woman who had loved him with all she had. He had believed that leaving her would lead to something brighter, something better. But now, surrounded by emptiness in the cold luxury of his apartment, all that remained were his mistakes, irreparable, relentless. As the past crept into every corner of the dark room, the question that haunted him grew louder. How did I let it all slip away? Life has a way of testing people at moments they least expect, and for Michael, his fall had come. But was this truly the end, or just a quiet pause before something began again? Keep watching to witness Michael's unraveling and the uncertain path that lies ahead for a man who lost everything. The luxury apartment sat silent within one of the city's tallest skyscrapers, a sanctuary of modern design and cold opulence. Yet stepping inside, the air was chilling, the kind of cold that seeped into the bones. Smooth, gray walls loomed on all sides, and the overhead lights, dangling high above, emitted a dim, lethargic yellow glow that barely pierced the darkness pooling in the room's corners. It was a sickly light, too feeble to banish the shadows swallowing the space whole. Beneath the lights, sleek furniture polished black, geometric and precise, stood lifeless and vacant, as if abandoned. A glossy leather sofa, once pristine, was now buried under a heap of wrinkled coats and stained cushions askew with neglect. Empty bottles of liquor littered the floor, some toppled over with dregs of dark liquid staining an expensive fur rug beneath them. Nearby, crushed pizza boxes, their greasy paper torn and crumpled, sat in a pile, the smell of rancid oil and mold drifting faintly through the room like a bitter memory left too long. A glass coffee table that once gleamed with elegance had lost its luster, its surface marred by ash, dried coffee stains, and crumpled papers. A television remote lay abandoned, its batteries long dead, and the dark TV screen reflected a faint, distorted image of the chaos around it, like a grim mirror reminding its owner of his decay. The wind hissed through a window left slightly ajar, the soft whistle unnerving in the otherwise suffocating silence. It wove its way into every crevice, rattling the heavy curtains that hung like mournful specters, shifting just enough to mimic a presence lingering in the room. The silence was relentless, broken only by the low hum of a cell phone vibrating on the floor, a sound that clawed desperately for attention, a plea ignored. In the midst of the ruin sat Michael, slumped on the wide sofa. His legs sprawled carelessly, his disheveled hair fell forward to obscure his gaunt, hollow face. A rumpled dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, exposed the sharp outline of his collarbones. One hand clutched the neck of an almost empty liquor bottle, while the other hung lifelessly toward the floor. His calloused palm clenched and unclenched, as if trying to hold onto something invisible that kept slipping through his fingers. Michael's eyes, bloodshot, hollow, and distant, stared vacantly into the void before him, searching for answers in the emptiness that had engulfed him. He said nothing, but his heavy, uneven breaths and the faint tremor in his shoulders betrayed the weight of everything left unsaid. This was the same man who had once carried himself with pride and poise, a man brimming with confidence. Now, he was nothing but a hollow shell, spiraling deeper into a pit of failure he had dug for himself. The phone buzzed again, its vibration echoing in the silent room like a distant heartbeat. Michael flinched at the sound, his vacant stare snapping toward the glowing screen on the floor. The name of a familiar contact lit up, but he didn't move to answer. Instead, his grip on the bottle tightened until his knuckles turned white, and with a sudden burst of fury, he hurled it across the room. The shattering of glass rang out, sharp and violent, the sound reverberating through the dead air like a scream. Shards scattered across the floor, sparkling faintly in the weak light, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Michael lurched to his feet, unsteady and staggering. His hands shot to his head, fingers curling into his scalp as if trying to claw his way out of his own skin. "God damn it!" he growled, the words raw and choked, his voice cracked from the weight of alcohol and sleepless nights. Around him, the room seemed to shrink, its walls closing in, pressing on his chest, his mind unraveling under the strain of a chaos he couldn't escape. Outside the window, the dusk deepened, the last traces of light slipping away as shadows poured into the room like ink. The world beyond the glass was cold and gray, a reflection of the man who stood at its center, stripped of everything: love, family, success. All of it gone, slipping through his grasp like sand through his fingers. Finally, Michael collapsed back onto the sofa, his body sinking into the cushions as though the weight of his own existence was too much to bear. He stared blankly into the consuming darkness before him, and in that black void, a memory flickered: Anna. Her face appeared like a fragile mirage, soft and fleeting, before dissolving into the shadows. The apartment swallowed him whole, the silence a suffocating shroud, heavy with regret and aimlessness. Michael sat there, caught in the stillness, and for the first time he felt the undeniable truth wrap its icy fingers around him: he was lost. And now, as the darkness closed in, Michael was faced with the inevitable. Could he rise from this pit, claw his way back into the light, or would he let the shadows consume him completely? Michael lay sprawled on the worn-out sofa, his body sinking deep into the cushions as though trying to disappear into its faded fabric. His disheveled black hair fell over part of his face, sunken eyes bloodshot and raw from sleepless nights, aching with the weight of alcohol and the remnants of heavy, suffocating thoughts. His rumpled dress shirt, creased and unkempt, mirrored the chaos of his life, disordered, stripped of dignity, beyond repair. The room around him remained in a state of ruin. Empty liquor bottles rolled across the floor, dark stains marred the old, expensive rug, and grease-streaked pizza boxes lay crumpled in heaps like forgotten remnants of better days. The once pristine apartment had become nothing more than a temporary refuge, devoid of the power and pride that once defined its occupant. Suddenly, the familiar vibrating hum of a phone shattered the oppressive silence. The sound pierced through Michael's foggy consciousness, yanking him from his aimless stupor. A heavy sigh escaped his lips as he sluggishly reached for the phone lying amidst the mess on the coffee table. His hand trembled, fingers almost too weak to hold it, the device slipping slightly before he managed to grasp it. The screen lit up, illuminating a name: Sophia. Michael froze, his breath catching in his chest. His thumb hovered over the screen, a wave of dread squeezing his heart in a vice-like grip. Hesitation held him still, but some deep, resigned instinct pushed him forward. He opened the message, bracing for impact. "Michael, it's over. Take care of yourself. I wish you luck." Just a few short, indifferent words, cold and impersonal, yet they struck like a fatal blow, severing the last thread tethering him to the edge of the abyss. Michael's eyes widened as he stared at the glowing screen, disbelief washing over him like icy water. His breathing grew shallow, ragged, the tremor in his hands spreading up his arms. The phone slipped from his grasp for a moment before he caught it, his gaze fixed on the lifeless message. Suddenly, a guttural cry erupted from deep within him, a mix of anguish and fury so raw it scraped against the walls of the empty room. In a blind, uncontrollable rage, he hurled the phone at the table. The crash echoed violently, the sharp sound of shattering glass tearing through the oppressive quiet. The phone ricocheted off the edge, landing on the floor with its screen cracked and flickering weakly before fading into darkness. Michael sank to the floor, his legs giving way beneath him. He slumped against the sofa, his shaking hands clawing at his hair, as though trying to tear apart the chaos swirling in his mind. His breaths came fast and uneven, each gasp a sharp punch to his chest, as though the air itself had turned against him. The silence that followed was heavier than before, steeped in something colder, darker. Only the faint whistle of wind slipping through a cracked window remained, carrying with it a bitter chill that seeped into the room, biting at Michael's already raw wounds. He lifted his face slowly, his eyes glassy and unfocused, staring blankly at nothing. Nothing. Sophia, whom he had sacrificed everything to have, was gone. Just like that. Gone, the same way he had left Anna behind. A bitter, hollow laugh burst from Michael's throat, sharp and short, like a jagged edge of glass scraping against stone. It vanished quickly, replaced by a long, defeated exhale as his head dropped forward. He sat there, hunched and broken, the picture of a man who had finally hit rock bottom. The silence around him was not empty, it was heavy, alive with the echoes of his mistakes. Sophia's words repeated on an endless loop in his mind, interwoven with fragmented memories of Anna. Her face flickered in his mind, her voice whispering from some long-forgotten corner of his conscience. The decisions he had made so confident, so final, were now daggers twisting in his chest. Michael's shoulders trembled, the weight of everything he had lost pressing down on him with a force he couldn't withstand. He buried his face in his hands, his body shaking as a tear slipped free, tracing a slow path down his cheek before falling soundlessly to the cold, unyielding floor. Outside the window, night had fully descended, wrapping the city in an endless shroud of darkness. The golden glow of distant lights flickered faintly in the distance, contrasting sharply with the suffocating gloom within the apartment. Somewhere far away, a car horn sounded sharp, fleeting and disconnected, like a cruel reminder that life carried on, indifferent to the man who sat paralyzed in the ruins of his choices. The city outside the window remained swallowed by the night. The dim yellow glow of distant streetlights only made the darkness inside Michael's apartment feel heavier, colder. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint whistle of wind seeping through a window left slightly ajar, a sound that mocked him relentlessly, pushing him deeper into despair. Michael sat slumped on the floor, his arms limp at his sides, his hollow eyes staring into the void as if his entire world had just crumbled to dust. In the haze of his confusion, his gaze landed on the glass coffee table. Amid the chaos of papers and discarded items, one crumpled envelope stood out. The bold red letters on its surface pierced through his stupor notice of foreclosure. Michael jolted upright, his entire body tensing as though struck by an electric shock. His breathing turned shallow and ragged as he snatched the envelope with trembling hands. He tore it open, desperation etched into every movement. Under the dim, flickering light, the cold, unfeeling words on the paper stabbed him like a knife. "We regret to inform you that, due to unpaid debts, the bank will proceed with the foreclosure of your property as per the stated regulations." The lines blurred before his eyes, the weight of every syllable pressing down on his chest like a cinder block. He crumpled the paper in his fist, his knuckles white as he squeezed it tighter. No, no. This can't be happening. He gasped, his voice breaking under the strain. It was real. Everything he had built, everything he had gambled on was collapsing right before him, as fragile as a sandcastle swept away by a relentless wave. Clinging to the last threads of hope, Michael stumbled toward the table, where a dust-covered laptop lay dormant. He flipped it open, his shaky fingers fumbling over the keyboard. The glow of the screen lit up his gaunt face, highlighting the shadows carved into his features from sleepless nights and relentless stress. There's got to be something. There's got to be a way to fix this. He muttered, his voice tinged with desperation. His fingers moved frantically across the keyboard as he sifted through old investment reports, emails, anything that could offer a sliver of salvation. His searches grew frantic, spiraling deeper until he typed in a name: Alex Carter, the former business partner who had promised him the lucrative deal that had cost him everything. The results loaded, and Michael froze. At the top of the page, a headline blazed across the screen. Nova's partnership launches with Sophia and entrepreneur Alex Carter. The article sprang to life in front of him, an image filling the screen. Sophia, radiant in a scarlet dress, her arm draped confidently around Alex Carter's. They stood in a grand, glittering venue, surrounded by applause and camera flashes, basking in their moment of triumph. Her smile was dazzling, her eyes gleaming with pride, as if she had orchestrated this outcome all along. Michael sat motionless, his breath caught in his throat. The blood drained from his face as he stared at the photo, unable to tear his eyes away. He traced their names on the screen with a trembling finger, his lips parting as he whispered hoarsely to no one. They planned it from the start. I've lost everything because of her. His voice choked on the last word, rough and despairing. Never in his life had Michael felt so blatantly and bitterly betrayed. Sophia, the woman he had once loved blindly, the woman he had sacrificed everything to be with, was now the very one who had pushed him into this dark abyss. A surge of fury erupted in Michael's chest, burning away every last shred of feeling. He roared, like a wounded animal trying to break free from an invisible trap. His hand slammed down on the table, sending the laptop toppling over, its screen going black instantly. A ragged gasp escaped his throat, as though all the air in his lungs had been sucked out at once. He buried his head in his hands, his body trembling with anger, pain, and an unspeakable shame. The vast apartment was swallowed by cold darkness, broken only by Michael's heavy breaths echoing through the emptiness, a haunting sound of a man utterly defeated. His life, his career, his reputation, his love had crumbled in a fleeting, brutal moment. And now, he was left with nothing but one raw, merciless truth: he had been betrayed. Outside the window, the night remained impenetrably black, shrouding all light and hope. The wind howled in waves, as if it cried out alongside Michael's anguish. And there he was, collapsed in the midst of the disarray, utterly alone and hollow in a way that was terrifying. Michael sat silently on the cold, hard floor, his back resting against the worn-out sofa. His shadow stretched across the gray wall, distorted and lonely, just like his life at this very moment. His hollow eyes remained fixed on the laptop sprawled before him. On the screen, the image of Sophia hand in hand with Alex Carter still lingered, her radiant smile, his confident gaze like a blade slicing again and again through Michael's already shattered pride. The room was suffocatingly silent, broken only by the sound of the wind howling louder through the cracks in the doorframe, each gust a cruel chorus emphasizing his utter solitude. The world outside continued to move, but for Michael, time had frozen. He sat there, unmoving, like an empty shell of a man. A single tear, salty and heavy, traced a slow path down his hollow cheek, slipping off his chin to the icy floor below. Michael made no move to wipe it away. He wasn't even aware he was crying. His lips trembled faintly, yet no sound escaped, as though he was desperately trying to swallow the agony deep into his chest. The laptop screen still glowed dimly in the darkened room, Sophia and the other man's images filling every inch of his vision. Suddenly, Michael let out a laugh, a dry, hollow sound devoid of warmth. It was snuffed out almost instantly, replaced by a choking sob that rose from his throat. His body crumpled forward, shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Michael clutched his head, fingers gripping his disheveled hair, as if trying to tear away the torment clawing at his mind. His sobs echoed faintly, fragile and broken, blending with the wind's wails outside, an eerie symphony of despair and anguish. Then, without warning, the overhead light flickered and went out. The room plunged into suffocating darkness, the laptop screen casting its faint glow across Michael's bowed face. Sophia and Alex remained there, a cruel reminder of everything he had lost: his career, his love, and himself. Outside, the wind still howled, mourning alongside the man who had crumbled completely. The apartment turned cold and lifeless, an unfeeling reflection of Michael's hollow and shattered soul. In the oppressive stillness, the wind's cry seemed to carve itself into the thick walls, etching Michael's despair into the very fabric of the room. Time seemed frozen in the suffocating darkness, and he, a defeated man, was lost in the abyss he had created. But life does not stop for anyone. Whether he wanted it or not, time would march on, and the world outside would continue to move. 10 years later, the golden light of early summer spilled over the city, carrying with it the breath of renewal, bright and full of hope. On one of the city's busiest streets, sunlight gleamed off the modern glass facade of a sprawling bookstore chain. Bold letters on the sign outside stood as a testament to resilience and rebirth New Light Books community. Inside, the space brimmed with life. Guests' cheerful voices blended with soft music floating from the overhead speakers. Towering shelves lined with neatly arranged books told stories of dedication and dreams. Banners hung proudly above, announcing cultural events and community reading programs. At the heart of it all, on a small stage at the back of the store, Anna stood. Dressed in an elegant cream-colored dress, her eyes shone with quiet pride and the calm that only time could grant. Her voice rang out, confident and captivating, as she addressed a crowd of guests, many of them journalists and prominent partners. Each word she spoke not only shared her success, but also reflected a journey of hardship and resilience that led her to this moment. Outside, a frail figure stood silently at the entrance, squinting against the harsh sunlight, as if unable to process what he was seeing. Michael, 10 years later, his life worn down and marked by scars, stared at the symbol of triumph built by the woman he once abandoned. Life had delivered its harshest answers to his wrong choices. But did Michael have the courage to step inside and face the past and the woman who had transformed so completely that she was now unrecognizable? Can the broken pieces of the past ever be mended, or is it far too late? Watch as the fated reunion unveils truths for two souls once standing on opposite sides of the abyss. The early summer morning bathed the bustling street in golden sunlight. Rays of light glinted off the gleaming glass facade of New Light, a proud and striking symbol of success. The golden letters on the large sign seemed to glow under the sun, standing out amidst the sea of surrounding storefronts. Inside the bookstore, the atmosphere was celebratory. Tall wooden shelves, meticulously arranged, were adorned with delicate potted plants, green leaves, and clusters of pure white baby's breath, adding a fresh, vibrant touch. In one corner, a small but elegant coffee counter emanated the rich aroma of espresso and pastries. Customers sat chatting cheerfully around neat, round tables, their voices blending into the soft hum of laughter and light-hearted conversation. At the back of the store, on a modest stage, Anna stood behind a lectern. A large banner hung behind her, proudly displaying the words "New Light, spreading knowledge and community." The soft strains of music flowed through the sound system, punctuated by the steady clicks of cameras from journalists and the continuous applause of the guests. Anna stood radiant in an elegant, cream-colored dress, her long, wavy hair cascading gently over her shoulders. Natural light poured in through the glass windows, making her appear almost luminous amidst the colorful and hopeful space. Her expression was calm, yet her eyes shone with quiet pride and fulfillment as she looked around at the results of her years of effort. Each word she spoke into the microphone carried warmth, a reflection of her belief and love for this place, a place that had once been the shattered remnants of a dream, now reborn into something far brighter than she could have imagined. Thank you all for being here today. New Light is not just a chain of bookstores. It's a space for sharing, learning, and connect. This is the result of countless efforts. But above all, it stands as proof that no matter how difficult the road may be, if we persevere and believe in ourselves, miracles can happen. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound mixing with the soft music and the hum of lively conversations. Anna's smile shone brighter than ever. Standing there in that moment, she was like a beacon, strong, hopeful, and resolute, a stark contrast to the fragile woman she had once been. Yet outside, in the shadows at the edge of the storefront, a gaunt, weary figure stood, lost amidst the crowd passing by. Michael. He wore a crumpled, faded dress shirt that hung loose on his thin, frail frame. His face was hollow, his skin sallow and lifeless. Dark circles rimmed his sunken eyes, red and raw from sleepless nights. His overgrown hair fell in disheveled strands across his forehead, partially obscuring his vacant expression, but unable to hide the deep pain and loss etched into every line of his face. Michael stood there, staring blankly at the new light sign glowing in the sunlight. Anna's speech echoed faintly in his ears, but to him, the words were not warm or hopeful. They were sharp knives cutting into the ruins of his pride. He was no longer the proud man he had once been, the man who had walked away from her without hesitation. Passers-by caught sight of him. Some glanced and quickly turned away. Others paused, curiosity flickering in their eyes, as they observed the worn-out man who seemed so out of place amid the bright and lively celebration. Soft murmurs spread through the crowd like whispers carried on the wind, enough for Michael to feel their weight. He lowered his head, shoving his hands deep into his pockets, as though trying to shield himself from their stares. He wasn't sure how long he had been standing there. Through the transparent glass, Anna's radiant smile, her beauty and confidence, struck him like a crushing blow. She had risen to unimaginable heights, while he had become nothing but a shadow, adrift and forgotten. He wanted to turn away, to disappear into the crowd, but his feet refused to move. The memories of 10 years ago surged back, every wrong decision playing out like a slow-motion film, dragging him deeper into the pit he had created for himself. And there, at the center of it all, was Anna, the woman he had once scorned and left behind, now a shining lighthouse amidst the storm that had become his life. Michael stood there, a shadow adrift in a sea of cheerful voices and lively celebration. His breathing grew heavier, his trembling hands unconsciously clutching the edge of his wrinkled coat. The sounds from inside the store spilled out the applause, the soft music making him feel all the more like an outsider, a stain that didn't belong in this bright, vibrant place. But then, as if propelled by some invisible force, Michael lifted his heavy feet and stepped through the glass door. The soft chime of the bell rang out small, almost insignificant, but in his mind, it tolled like a warning, reverberating through his entire being. He entered, moving slowly, hesitantly. His vacant eyes swept across the store's flawless interior. Everything was perfect: the neat rows of wooden shelves, the delicate potted plants, the gentle light that filled every corner. It all seemed to mock him, to remind him that Anna had done it. She had risen on her own, without him. Michael swallowed hard and stepped deeper inside. The faint scent of coffee lingered in the air, the cheerful chatter of customers pressing into his ears like a muffled weight. His gaze settled on the small stage at the back of the store, where Anna stood. She was there, strong, poised, and confident, utterly transformed from the fragile woman he had once abandoned. The stage lights cast a soft glow on her face, illuminating her radiant smile and the gentle warmth in her eyes that captivated those around her. Michael froze, rooted to the spot, his grip tightening further, his knuckles pale with strain. His chest constricted at the sight of her, beautiful, glowing, a part of a world he could no longer claim. A swell of admiration and regret rose within him, a relentless tide threatening to drown his reason. Anna's speech came to an end. The applause erupted, blending with the music to make the room seem even brighter, even livelier. She bowed slightly, her smile unwavering. But when her eyes fell on the familiar figure frozen among the crowd, everything seemed to stop. Anna stiffened. The smile vanished from her lips, her eyes widening slightly with a mix of shock and disbelief. The applause continued, the cameras flashed, but to her, the world fell eerily silent. All she could see was Michael, the man who had walked away from her 10 years ago, now standing before her, a ghost of himself, worn down and pitiful. In that fleeting moment, the past surged to life, crashing through the walls she had so carefully built. Memories of those agonizing days, the endless nights of silent tears, and the collapse she had fought to overcome returned like a flood. Her heart ached for just a second, but she caught herself quickly. Anna drew in a deep breath, her expression smoothing into a mask of calm resolve. Anna stood tall, her gaze no longer faltering as it once might have. She had learned to face the darkest moments of her life, and Michael, no matter who he had once been, was now just a relic of a chapter long closed. Michael remained frozen in place, his vacant eyes swirling with turmoil as they met hers. He wanted to step forward, to say something, anything, but his throat felt dry, his voice gone. The crowd seemed to instinctively part, creating a narrow gap between them. It wasn't far, but it felt infinite, an unbridgeable chasm carved by time and regret. Anna took another steady breath, the faintest smile tugging at her lips, not for him, but for herself. It was the smile of someone who had reclaimed her life. Without hesitation, she stepped down from the stage and melted into the crowd, leaving Michael standing there lost and more alone than ever before. Michael stumbled back slightly, his shoulders sagging under the crushing weight of it all. He realized then that the distance between them was not just a few short steps. It was a vast abyss of time, mistakes, and the consequences of choices that could never be undone. He drew in a deep breath, as though summoning every last ounce of courage he had left. His voice, hoarse and strained, cracked as the first words escaped his lips. "Anna, it's me." Anna stood across from him, unflinching. Her face held no trace of the softness it once did, no lingering shadows of the pain he had left behind. Her dark eyes, sharp, steady, and unwavering, quietly bore into him, as though seeing through every last bit of weakness he carried. She lifted the corner of her mouth not into a smile, but into something distant and cold, the shape of a chasm that had formed long ago. Her voice, calm yet cutting, sliced through the hollow air. "I know. Why are you here?" The question made Michael falter. His head bowed for a moment, his shoulders sinking further under the weight of himself. His fingers curled tighter around the edge of his worn coat, trembling with a desperation he could no longer hide. Slowly, he looked up again, his red-rimmed eyes shining with a raw, hopeless sorrow. His voice wavered, every word carrying the weight of a belated confession. "I've lost everything. I couldn't live without apologizing to you." For a moment, the entire room seemed to still. The soft music played faintly somewhere in the distance, but to them, the sound had vanished into nothingness. Anna narrowed her eyes, watching him silent, unyielding, unmoved. At last, she exhaled deeply, as though gathering up every shard of what she had endured. She stepped forward, closing the small distance between them, her voice deliberate and clear, laced with both steel and pride. "An apology. Is that all you have after all these years, Michael? Do you think a single sorry can turn back time or erase everything you destroyed?" Michael's body trembled, her words striking him like a blow. His lips parted, as if to say something, anything to beg for even a shred of forgiveness, but no sound came. Anna's words hung in the air like a harsh truth, forcing him to confront the pitiful reflection of the man he had become. She continued, her tone no longer sharp, but even more devastating in its calm, unwavering clarity. "You couldn't live without apologizing? What about me, Michael? I couldn't survive when you walked away. But I did. I picked myself up. And look." Anna raised her hand, gesturing to the store, the light spilling through the windows, the cheerful chatter of customers, the undeniable proof of the years of grit and resilience that had brought her to this very moment. Turning back to him, she offered a faint, distant smile, one that no longer belonged to him. My life is so much better without you." Michael staggered back a step, as though the strength had been drained from his legs. Her words cut deep, sharper and more merciless than he could have ever imagined. He had come here searching for redemption, but all he found was a mirror reflecting a man who had lost everything and who could never go back. The room felt suffocating around him. The laughter and chatter of the crowd carried on, bright and relentless, but Michael couldn't hear any of it. All he could see was Anna strong, confident, and free of him, a truth so bitter that it forced him to accept the inescapable: she no longer needed him. Inside the store, the lively atmosphere of the grand opening was suddenly severed as a middle-aged man in a gray suit stepped through the door. His sudden presence was like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over the bright, hopeful energy of the room. His stride was firm and unyielding, and his cold eyes swept across the murmuring crowd before stopping at the stage where Anna stood. Stopping in front of her, the man pulled a folder from his briefcase. His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Ms. Anna, I represent Everest Financial Group, the largest financial conglomerate in this region. I'm here to officially inform you that the unpaid lease balance is now several weeks overdue. If full payment is not made today, your entire chain of stores will be shut down and seized in accordance with the law." A tense silence fell over the room. The soft background music suddenly felt distant and hollow as whispers began to ripple through the guests. A few journalists hastily lifted their cameras, the flashes going off in rapid succession, heightening the palpable tension in the air. Anna's brows furrowed slightly, her hand tightening around the microphone, yet not a flicker of panic showed on her face. "I understand," she replied, her voice calm though her heart raced violently in her chest. "I will take care of it." From across the room, Michael felt frozen in place. The name Everest Financial Group struck him like a thunderclap, jolting him back to the grim reality of the moment. The company was a behemoth in finance, infamous for its ruthless acquisitions and asset seizures. He had heard of them in his prime, and now that very name loomed over Anna, standing on the razor's edge between triumph and ruin. Unable to watch any longer, Michael stepped forward. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a narrow path between him and Anna. His voice broke the silence, pleading, raw and desperate. "Let me help." Anna turned to face him, her gaze locking onto his. Michael's eyes were a swirling storm of regret and anguish, a man lost, trying to find redemption in whatever fractured pieces remained. He looked small now, his frail figure and defeated posture a stark contrast to the imposing gravity of the moment. He hesitated, but forced himself to continue, his voice cracking. "I don't have much, but I'll do anything to help you. You can't let them take what you built with your own hands, your own strength." Anna stared at him for a long moment, her eyes flickering with something in emotion that was hard to name. There was a sincerity in Michael's voice that surprised her, a remnant of the man she had once known, buried beneath the wreckage of years gone by. But Anna was no longer the woman who would falter. Her voice was steady, firm, but not unkind as she spoke. "You don't need to atone for me, Michael." Michael's face fell, her words hitting him like a blow. His eyes clouded with a familiar sadness, a pain he couldn't disguise. Anna drew in a slow breath, her shoulders squaring with quiet resolve as she turned back toward the representative from Everest Financial Group. There was nothing fragile about her now, only the image of a woman prepared to fight, no matter the odds. "Give me one day," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "You'll have your answer tomorrow." The man's brow creased with skepticism, his cold eyes narrowing slightly. But after a brief pause, he gave a curt nod. "Fine. We'll await your final answer." As he turned and left, the room remained eerily silent. All eyes were on Anna, some curious, others anxious, but she remained where she was, poised and unshaken. Michael watched her, something indescribable swelling in his chest. The woman he had once thought weak, someone who would always depend on him, now stood as an immovable force, strong, resolute, a pillar that would not crumble. Anna stepped away from the stage, heading toward the reception desk with her head held high. Determination burned in her gaze, her every movement exuding quiet strength. She knew the challenge ahead would be unforgiving, But she had come too far, endured too much, to turn back now. Anna walked toward the desk where the representative from Everest Financial Group sat waiting. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor with a sharp, deliberate rhythm that echoed through the unnaturally quiet bookstore. The crowd held its breath, their eyes fixed on her every step, as if afraid to disturb this fragile, electrified moment. From the corner of the room, Michael watched her with a mixture of awe and a guilt he couldn't name. He had thought she might accept his help, but now Anna was proving beyond any doubt that she needed no one to save what mattered most to her. The representative sat there, his face impassive, his calculating eyes waiting for a sign of surrender. But Anna showed no fear, no hesitation. She stopped in front of him, meeting his gaze with sharp, unwavering resolve. Bathed in the late morning light, she stood tall, radiating a quiet strength that no one could deny. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a neatly folded check. The soft rustle of paper was barely audible, yet it carried the weight of finality. Anna placed it on the table, her gaze never breaking from his. "This is the last payment I need to secure this store." Her voice rang out, clear and unshakable, each word striking like a hammer against the man's arrogance. "You'll never have it." For the first time, the man's cold demeanor wavered. His eyes flickered with surprise, a brief shadow of disbelief crossing his face as he stared at the check before him. He frowned slightly, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. Anna had done what he hadn't expected. She'd prepared for this moment, and she'd won. The room exploded. Applause erupted from every corner, building into a thunderous crescendo of cheers and whistles. Guests shouted in triumph, and camera flashes burst like fireworks, capturing the moment when a woman overcame impossible odds with nothing but her courage and willpower. Anna stood in the center of it all, a brilliant smile lighting up her face. She didn't turn to look at Michael, not because she wanted to ignore him, but because this moment belonged to her, to the people who had believed in her, and to herself. Michael remained frozen in place, his vision blurring as he watched Anna in her moment of triumph. She was radiant, so radiant that she felt untouchable. The truth struck him like a blow to the chest. He had lost her forever. That realization burned away the last of his pride, leaving only the bitter reminder of what he had let slip through his fingers. The representative picked up the check, his lips pressed into a thin line as he swallowed his frustration. "Very well, Ms. Anna. We will withdraw. Congratulations on retaining your store." With a stiff nod, he turned and walked away, leaving behind murmurs of awe and admiration that rippled through the crowd. Anna bowed slightly, acknowledging the endless applause. Her gaze swept over the store, now brighter and more alive than ever before. This was more than a victory over a corporate giant. It was a victory over her past, over every doubt and setback she had endured. It was proof that she had become strong enough to protect her dream, without relying on anyone. Outside the glass windows, the early summer sun poured down, reflecting brilliantly off the words "new light." Anna drew in a deep breath, her eyes glowing with a mix of determination and quiet pride. Today she had proven to the world and to herself that she had stepped out of the shadows of her past and into the light she had forged with her own hands. Anna stood still, surrounded by the soft morning light that bathed the bookstore and the distant hum of laughter and chatter from the guests. Her heart beat in steady rhythm, carrying a peace she hadn't felt in a very long time, one that she could finally embrace in its entirety. After all the storms and trials, she had reached this day, the day she truly left behind the painful remnants of the past, standing on her own 2 feet, confident in the path she had chosen. The faint sound of footsteps echoed behind her, shattering the serene quiet of the moment. A familiar figure slowly approached, each step hesitant, as though afraid to disturb a world he no longer belonged to. It was Michael. He stood there, his face gaunt, aged far beyond his years, a stark contrast to the once proud man he used to be. His deep-set eyes, hollow and shrouded in shadow, fixed on Anna where she stood bathed in light. In that gaze, one could see it all: regret, remorse, and a grief so raw it seemed to gnaw at him with every breath. Now, he was but a shadow of himself, alone, broken, and lost in the irreparable mistakes of his past. Sensing his presence, Anna slowly turned. Her eyes that had once carried so much pain and so many tears because of this man now held only a quiet calm, a tranquility that was both startling and resolute. There was no anger left, no lingering wounds yet to heal. Her gaze was clear and unyielding, like a river that had washed away all the bitterness and scars that once weighed her down. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat, too heavy to bear. Finally, his voice broke the silence, a hoarse, fragile whisper that seemed to fracture as it left his lips. "Anna, I'm sorry." The simple words splintered into the air like a surrender, a belated confession of guilt. His eyes searched hers, desperately seeking something, some spark of forgiveness, a chance for redemption, or even just a sign that he still existed somewhere in her world. But all he received was Anna's gentle smile, a smile that no longer belonged to him, but to herself, to the freedom and peace she had earned on her own. Her voice rose softly but firmly, carrying the weight of a final declaration. "Michael, I forgave you a long time ago." Michael flinched slightly, his eyes widening in surprise and disbelief. He blinked, as if trying to process what he had just heard, but before he could respond, Anna continued, her voice unwavering and filled with a quiet strength forged through years of hardship. "But not so you could come back. I forgave you so I could move forward." Her words landed like a final blow, ringing with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. It was an ending sharp and unyielding. There would be no lingering threads, no unresolved pain holding her back. Anna had let go, not for him, but for herself. Forgiveness was not an invitation to turn back, it was her path forward, free and unburdened. Michael bowed his head, his shoulders trembling slightly, as though the last bit of strength had drained from him. His lips moved, but no words came. He knew now it was over. The brutal, undeniable truth was that Anna had moved on to a place where he no longer had a role, a place where he could never follow. At last, Michael turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy and dragging, as though each step carried the weight of his shame and regret. The glass door creaked open as he left the store, then gently clicked shut behind him. The small chime of the doorbell rang out soft and fleeting, but to Anna, it echoed like the final note of a story that had stretched on for far too long. She stood still, watching his figure fade into the bustling crowd outside, swallowed by the golden glow of the sunlit street. There were no tears, no regrets, no lingering pain to hold her back. Her heart felt light, as if she were a blank canvas once again, free and unmarked. At last she had found release. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass windows, illuminating the words "New Light" emblazoned proudly on the storefront sign. Anna took a deep, steady breath, her eyes glowing with resolve, and her lips curled into a smile radiant, proud, and unshakable. The past is part of who we are, but it does not define who we will become. Let go of what has been, step boldly forward, and you will find yourself shining brighter than ever before. Her words were not just a message to herself, but to anyone who had ever stumbled, ever fallen in the long, winding journey of life. The sky ahead stretched vast and open, filled with new opportunities and endless hope. Anna knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning, a new chapter she would write with her own hands, her own heart, and all the courage she had discovered within herself. Anna took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping over the vast, softly illuminated space of the bookstore. Today was a special day, the one-year anniversary of the New Light bookstore chain, a milestone marking her growth, success, and the unwavering strength she had discovered within herself. This event was not just a celebration, it was a heartfelt gesture of gratitude to all those who had believed in her, supported her, and walked beside her through a journey marked by hardship and resilience. The ceremony was held in the flagship store, the very place where it all began. Classic wooden shelves stood neatly arranged, accented with delicate potted plants and pastel-colored balloons tied at various corners of the room, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and welcoming. At the center stood a modest stage, little more than a wooden podium, a microphone, and a large banner behind it that read, "1 year anniversary, New Light, a journey from darkness to hope." On the bookshelves, carefully curated titles were displayed, each chosen to reflect themes of perseverance, triumph, and the will to rise above life's trials, values Anna had carried with her and imbued into this space. A corner of the room had been transformed into a guest area where visitors could sign their names and share personal reflections about books, the store, or their own stories. Guests arrived from all walks of life: old friends, loyal customers, journalists, and a few major publishing partners. They gathered here not only to celebrate Anna's accomplishments, but to hear her story, a story of a woman who had risen from the ruins of her past and built her own new light, not just for herself, but for a community that cherished it. Applause and excited chatter filled the space, blending with the gentle music streaming from the speakers, creating an atmosphere of warmth and celebration. Near the stage, reporters prepared their cameras, eager to capture the moment when the woman behind this remarkable success would step into the spotlight. Behind the temporary backstage curtain, Anna stood still, her heart pounding not with nerves, but with emotion. Looking around the room, she saw the echoes of everything she had endured: the sleepless nights, the moments she almost broke when the store teetered on the edge of collapse, and the tears and sweat she had shed to arrive at this day. Margaret, the store's former owner, approached with a kind, knowing smile etched across her face. Placing a gentle hand on Anna's shoulder, she spoke with quiet pride. "You've turned your dream into reality, Anna. Be proud of that. Today, you deserve every bit of this." Anna smiled back, gratitude shining in her eyes. She knew Margaret had always been a cornerstone in her journey, a person who had given her a chance when the world had turned its back. Outside, the host's voice rang out. "And now, please welcome the founder of New Light, MS, Anna, to share her inspiring story." Applause erupted through the room, echoing like a wave of encouragement. Anna drew in one last steadying breath, smoothing her elegant dress. She stepped onto the stage, her strides confident and purposeful. In the sea of faces turned toward her, she saw hope, admiration, and faith they placed in her. The sunlight streaming through the large glass windows bathed the stage, casting a golden glow on her face, as though marking this moment as a new beginning. Anna took the microphone, her smile radiant, one of a woman who had finally found her strength. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today." She began, her voice steady and warm. "This event is not just a celebration of the store, but a milestone in my life, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we can find light, as long as we don't give up." Near the doorway, Michael stood, his frail shoulders sagging beneath the weight of everything he had lost. The worn-out suit he wore couldn't hide his exhaustion, the weariness etched into his hollow face. His disheveled hair, streaked with silver, and the deep shadows beneath his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and restless regret. But the most striking change was in his gaze, once filled with pride, now empty, heavy, with a sorrow he couldn't escape. He watched Anna on the stage, strong, confident, a lighthouse standing tall in a crowd that cheered for her. She was radiant, commanding, her words flowing with clarity and purpose, reaching every corner of the room. The sunlight streaming in from the windows crowned her with a halo of light, as if the universe itself recognized her triumph. She was the very image of everything Michael had once abandoned and lost, someone he could no longer touch. A bitter ache tightened in his chest, sharp and relentless. In that moment, Michael felt so small, so insignificant. The realization was merciless. Anna no longer belonged to his world. He had thrown away the most precious thing in his life, and now he was forced to witness her shining in a way that made his presence feel like an intrusion. His hands curled into fists, nails digging into his palms as if trying to ground himself, but nothing could dull the anguish within. He wanted to turn away, to escape the light that revealed all his mistakes. Yet his legs wouldn't move. He stood there, a helpless spectator to her victory, to the life she had built without him. Then, Anna looked up, and for the briefest of moments, her gaze landed on where Michael stood. It was fleeting, no longer than a heartbeat. But in that glance, there was no anger, no lingering pain, only a calm acceptance, and perhaps a trace of wistful regret, as if she no longer saw the man who had hurt her, but merely a shadow left behind. Michael's chest tightened, his breath catching as he realized that this was the end. The space between them was no longer measured in steps, but in lifetimes hers moving forward, while his remained trapped in the past. Applause thundered through the store once more, drowning out the ache in Michael's heart. He bowed his head low, finally finding the strength to turn away. His steps were heavy, slow, as he walked toward the door. The glass door opened with a soft creak and closed behind him with a faint chime, a sound so small, yet it rang like the final note of a story that had already ended. Inside, Anna continued her speech, her radiant smile unwavering and her eyes alight with pride. She no longer looked toward the door. Her past was behind her now, and she knew she was stepping into a future full of light, a future she had built with her own hands, no longer needing salvation from anyone. Outside, the early summer sunlight poured down, casting its golden warmth on everything it touched. But for Michael, that light was blinding and unbearable, a searing reminder of life's unrelenting fairness. Every choice comes with its price. Inside the bookstore, the applause roared like a triumphant anthem, rising in harmony with Anna's brilliant smile as she stood on the stage. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze filled with happiness and deep gratitude. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for being here today, Anna said, her voice warm and steady, carrying a quiet strength. Thank you for believing in me and supporting me through this journey. Always remember, no matter how deep the darkness may seem, the light you seek is already within you. As long as you don't give up, you'll find it. The applause erupted again, louder this time, filling the room with waves of admiration and encouragement. Faces beamed up at her, smiles bright with pride and inspiration, as though to honor her victory. Anna took a deep breath, steadying her grip on the microphone, and delivered her final words, a message as genuine as it was profound. This isn't just my story. It could be yours or anyone's. Believe in yourself and keep moving forward, because the future is waiting for those who dare to rise after they fall. And remember, this door, the New Light Bookstore, will always be open to welcome you. The room erupted once more into thunderous applause and cheers. Anna bowed her head again in gratitude, her heart swelling with fulfillment. This journey is far from over, and I hope we will always find each other in the brightest of places. Thank you for being here with me today. Outside, the summer sun continued to shine brilliantly, its rays illuminating the words "New Light" emblazoned proudly on the storefront. And in that moment, Anna's story didn't simply close, it opened to a new chapter, one full of hope and inspiration, a message to anyone still searching for the light within themselves. Thank you for walking alongside this story. Her voice seemed to echo beyond the walls. Let us continue forward together and witness new journeys unfold, where those who dare to step through the darkness will shine stronger than ever before.